Hi there, and welcome back to the College Physics series. In our previous lessons, we've studied kinematics, the mathematics of motion, describing how object moves using pictures, graphs, and equations. But there's a big question that still remains unanswered. What causes motion? These are the ideas that we will be discussing in today's lesson. Thank you for being here, and let's get started. Think back to any example that we've done that involves an object accelerating. The reality that we ignored previously is that any object's acceleration is the result of forces acting on that object. So in this lesson, we're diving into the world of dynamics, which is the study of forces that cause motion. This will take us deeper into what really drives the world around us. Let's begin with something that's somewhat familiar. What you're looking at is a picture of a snake-necked turtle. It gets its name because its neck looks like a snake. When this turtle is catching prey, it has the ability to accelerate its head at a rate of 40 meters per second squared. If I convert this into G's, that's about 4 times the acceleration due to gravity on Earth. But what's behind this sudden, rapid motion? The answer lies in the forces the turtle exerts to make this movement possible. Everywhere we look, we see forces in action. The friction that stops your textbook sliding across a table, the lift that allows a plane to soar, and the gravity that keeps us grounded. Forces are the why behind every motion we observe. Understanding these forces helps us to explore the world in a whole new way. Now, to understand forces fully, let's start with Newton's first law, or what we often call the Law of Inertia. This law says, if an object is at rest, it will stay at rest, and if it is moving, it will keep moving in a straight line at a constant speed, unless an external force acts on it. For example, imagine sliding a textbook across a desk. When you stop pushing, it quickly comes to rest, but that's because of the friction between the book and the desk. Now, think of a hockey puck gliding on smooth ice. With less friction, it keeps moving longer, showing us that an object in motion doesn't need a constant push to keep going. It just needs to be free of opposing forces. This principle, confirmed by careful experiments over centuries, is so fundamental that we see it everywhere, even in space. Once an object, like a spacecraft, is moving, it'll keep moving in a straight line unless acted upon by another force, like gravity or resistive forces. Now let's get more precise about what a force is. You might think of a force as a simple push or a pull, but there's more to it. We talk about a force as a specific action, something one object applies to another. And here's an important point. Every force needs an agent, which is a source that acts on an object. Here's another way to think about this. In other words, when we say that every force needs an agent, we are just saying that a force has a specific identifiable cause. Imagine throwing a ball. Your hand is the agent that pushes the ball forward. The ball doesn't just start moving on its own. It requires a force with a source. From the ball's perspective, it's experiencing a force from you, and that push is what sets it into motion. This idea that a force is an interaction between an agent and an object is key. Forces do not exist in isolation. So anytime you see an object moving, there is always an agent behind it. Now, not all forces need direct contact. Most forces in our daily lives are what we call contact forces. Contact forces are just forces that act by touching. A few examples are pushing a door to open it, pulling a drawer open. These actions require direct contact between your hand and the object. But some forces work from a distance. Think of a magnet pulling a paperclip without touching it, or gravity pulling a coffee cup to the ground when you let go. These are long-range forces. They don't need physical contact to have an effect. We'll see both of these types of forces in countless ways, but this simple distinction will help you understand forces more clearly. Another crucial property of forces is that they are vectors. This means that, like displacement or velocity, they have both magnitude, meaning how strong the force is, and direction, meaning where it's headed. To show this, we use arrows called force vectors. Imagine a box on a table. If you push it to the right, Then we would draw an arrow pointing to the right, starting from the box. We'd also label it F, standing for force, with an arrowhead on top to signify that it is a vector quantity. The length of the arrow shows the strength of your push. If you push harder, the arrow gets longer, representing a greater force. Everything that we've learned about the properties of vectors when it comes to adding, subtracting, multiplying by scalars, as well as resolving vectors into their components, will come into our analysis of vectors throughout these lessons. This is why we draw forces as arrows. They help us see at a glance both the direction and strength of a force acting on an object. So what happens when more than one force acts on an object? In physics, we combine all the forces acting on an object into what's called the net force. And the symbol we give this net force is sigma F, where sigma is this E-looking letter. But in Greek, this is the capital sigma. And for us, it represents a summation. So whenever you see this symbol, capital sigma, then mathematically what it's telling you to do is to add. So when I see sigma F, I interpret that to mean I'm going to be adding up all of these forces. And that's what we call the net force. One major idea that we're going to be emphasizing throughout our study of forces is that the net force is responsible for telling where an object to move. Think of the net force as the final overall push or pull on an object. It's what gives an object its acceleration or keeps it at rest. And this is why forces are such a powerful concept. By understanding net force, we can predict how objects will move or stay still. Let's wrap up with an example from everyday life. In a car crash, a vehicle stops suddenly, but if you're not wearing a seatbelt, your body would keep moving forward at the same speed the car was going. So let's say this car was moving at 60 miles per hour and you were not wearing your seatbelt in the driver's seat. The car is going to hit this tree and it's going to damage its front end pretty badly. And the tree is going to stop the car. But because you're not wearing your seatbelt, you are not attached with the car. Therefore, you are not stopping with the car. What that means is that you're going to continue moving. There is no force to slow you down. There is the force from the tree acting with the car, so it slows the car down, but none for you. Therefore, you win the prize of flying out of the windshield. And the speed that you leave at is 60 miles an hour. That's how fast you were moving. That's Newton's first law in action. Objects in motion stay in motion. The seatbelt acts as an external force that stops you safely rather than letting you keep moving toward the dashboard. Here, forces aren't just abstract ideas. They're principles that keep us safe in real life. So, to recap, forces are the invisible whys behind every motion, and they come from specific agents acting on objects. Whether they're contact forces or long-range forces, they're always interactions between two things. Forces are vector quantities, and by understanding net force, we gain a powerful tool for predicting and controlling motion. Thank you for joining me today on this lesson about forces. If you found this video helpful, consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with a person that might benefit from it. Thank you for being a part of the College Physics series. I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.